Hi all, I'm just going to try and go through a few points in the service firm question from the 2010 paper. Now we've done the first two parts, so I'm just going to move on to the profit and loss account, but I'm not going to do every single part of it because some of it is very straightforward. So I'll just do some of the things that are new to us that we haven't seen in the club account so far. So first thing to note, it says to prepare a profit and loss account for the year ended, and that's the heading that you'll put in there, but really it's in the format of an income and expenditure account. You can see there's an income heading and a less expenses, or if you put in expenditure, that will be fine as well. Okay, so just to look at, and I'm going to go quickly through this to get as much done in this video before I have to make 2 or 3 videos. So the first thing in the income section is interest received. I won't go through that. That's the same as in the club accounts, and in this case it's just 5% of 30,000 in investments. The next one, profit from shop. Again, that's just taken from your shop trading profit and loss account, whatever the profit figure you got in part B was. And then the next part is the client's fees. Now I'll go through that very quickly. So the client's fees, if we have a look over here, for a start, it says, this is similar to the subscriptions in the club accounts. In the receipts and payments account, we have client's fees, 340,000. So I'm just going to write it down here. Client's fees, 340. That's the amount of money you got in total for clients' fees during the year. Then we look at the top and see if there's anybody who paid in advance, or if there's any owing from last year. And we see client deposits paid in advance, 4,000. So paid in advance 4,000, it means it was paid last year, but it was for this year. So we're going to add that on to the figure, 340,000 for this year. Next, we're going to have a look at down at the bottom to see if it says anything about clients' fees. Part 3 of the additional information, clients' fees include fees for 2010 of 5,000. So next year is 2010, so that's client fees prepaid for next year. So we don't want that in this year's figure, so minus 5,000. Okay, and the last thing then is in part 3 also here. It says clients' fees in arrears at the 31st of the 12th 2009, 500. So that's clients' fees due, money owed to you at the end of 2009, 500. But it's for 2009, so we're going to add that on, plus 500, and that total then should give you what you have up here, the 339,500 up here. Okay. So, going down through the expenses or the expenditure, the first one, wages and salaries. This is just the figure from the receipts and payments account, the amount that you paid out during the year, minus the amount of wages that you paid the person in the shop. So you've already taken into account this figure when you were working out the profit for the shop, so there's no need to put it in twice. So we subtract it from the total wages and salaries figure. Same goes for insurance. 6,400 is the figure from the receipts and payments account. That's how much you paid out, but we already said that some of that was for the shop, so you don't want to include it twice, so you subtract it to get this figure here. Okay. The next one then is a bit more complicated. It's the light and heat figure, so we'll go through that again. So I always start with whatever you paid out for light and heat in the receipts and payments account. We see here it is 3,100. Okay, so down here I'm going to start with that, 3,100. And again, then we look at anything to do with light and heat at the start of the question, at the end of the question. And when we say anything, I mean, for instance, up here at the top we've stock of heating oil, but if we had anything to do with electricity or anything like that as well, we'd include. So we see stock of heating oil, 1,600. And with that, we add that on because what we say is, that heating oil, we had that stock at the start of the year. We must have bought it last year, but we're going to use it this year. So it's for this year. So it's going to be, it should be a cost of this year really. So we're adding it on to this year's costs. Then we look at the part 1 of the additional. It says heating oil 300, so we're going to subtract that. That's what's left over at the end of the year, so we're not using that this year. That's going to be used next year, so we don't want to include the cost of that in our figure for light and heat for this year. And lastly then, if we go back here again, usually in this question there's something about electricity due, and there is there, part 7, this is getting a bit blurry, Part 7, it says electricity due on the 31st of the 12th, 2009, €320. So we're going to add that on. Actually, there's one other thing as well. So I'm going to say plus 320. That's electricity due, so that means that we use the electricity this year, but we just haven't paid the bill yet. But it was for this year, so we're adding that on to the cost for this year. But the other thing then is, if we go back to, I'm just going to turn this over for a second. Do you see there was light and heat for the shop we already saw was €250. Well, we've already included that cost in the shop, so we don't want to include it twice here. So we're going to subtract that 250 also over here. And when we subtract that, then that should give us our figure of 4,470 that we have in the less expenses. Okay. Next one then is purchase of supplies. We have it here, the 36,700. Now there's just a little bit of work to be done there as well. So when we talk about purchase of supplies, we're talking about, purchasing maybe towels or toilet paper or these type of things that will be used in the nursing home. They're not being sold in the shop. They're just being used by the clients in the nursing home and indeed the employees. So it will start with purchase of supplies there from the receipts and payments account. It says 35,900. So 35,900. That's our first figure. And then usually what we have is either creditors or, well, just creditors really, no debtors for supplies because we're not selling them. If we look for, at the very top, there was creditors for supplies to the nursing home, €1,000, and creditors are people we owe money to. So we owed at the start of the year €1,000 for supplies, but we assume that those were supplies that we bought for last year. We just haven't paid for them yet. So we don't want to include that in this year's cost. So we minus 1,000 because we assume that we did pay it during the year and that 1,000 was included in this 35,900, but it's not an expense of this period, so we're going to subtract it. Same goes then, we have a look at the end and we see is there any creditors for supplies. There is part 6 in the nursing home at the end of the year and it says it's €1,800, so we're going to add that on because that's money that we haven't paid yet for supplies that we bought this year. So it is for this year period, and that should give us the 36,700 that we have in the less expenses section. Okay. Next thing is loan interest. The loan interest is calculated the same way as the club account, so we'll leave that go. Laundry, 2,000. There's no workings to be done. That's just taken straight from the receipts and payments account. Telephone, one item to be done there. It's just the. Let me see now. It's the €1,600 that you get from the receipts and payments account, and you just take the 350 that we already put into the shop, or we charge to the shop, so we don't want to do that twice. The next thing then is the bad debt. Now the bad debt is, we'll just talk about that very briefly. We see that there was a dishonoured cheque of €600 in the receipts and payments account. Now that just means that a cheque bounced. Someone wrote us a cheque and there wasn't enough cash in their account for the bank to pay out that cheque or pay that money to us from that cheque. So that doesn't mean that they're not going to pay us, except until we see later on down here in part 4, it says the dishonoured cheque was not subsequently recovered and was written off as a bad debt. Okay, so I'm going to do another video maybe later tonight for tomorrow just about dishonoured cheques and bad debts alone. So for now I just want you to take it that bad debts are written off as expenses. So when that €600 here dishonoured cheque became a bad debt, then it became an expense that we put into our income and expenditure, and we'll as I say, I'll explain more about that in the next video, or in a later video anyway. So over here, €600 bad debt. Now I'm going to be running out of time here, so I'm going to break this into 2 videos. I'll be back with the second one shortly.